Mark your calendar, AAOS 2026 registration kicks off November 3rd. From March 2nd to March 6th, New Orleans is where Orthopaedics comes alive. Reunite with classmates, share ideas with peers, and connect with colleagues worldwide. This is where your best moments turn into memories. Don't miss out on early bird savings. Register now at aaos.org/NOLA2026. The AAOS Bone Beat Orthopedic Podcast channel is pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of the AAOS Now podcast. This monthly podcast series covers a broad range of topics to help orthopedic surgeons stay informed, enhance their practices, and provide the best possible care for their patients.
I'm Dr. Doug Lundy, and I'll be your host on this episode of the AAOS Now podcast. We'll be talking about a subject I'm sure that a lot of you are interested in, and that is the rapidly evolving AI landscape and the practical applications of AI in orthopedics. Joining me today to help us understand the impact and opportunities of AI is Dr. Peter Schilling. Dr. Schilling is an assistant professor of orthopedic surgery at the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth. Peter, welcome to the AAOS Now podcast. You founded the Dartmouth Center for AI Research in Orthopedics. What sparked your interest in AI, and when did you realize that it was important to the future of orthopedic surgery?
Well, it goes a long ways back. It's mainly connecting some dots. Like many things in life, it's not that you really know where you're going. Eventually, you have enough dots to connect to make a pathway or a picture. Always a bit of a nerd. And my first job out of college was as a coder. And at that time, dealing with data that we thought was truly big data, which is a number of years of Medicare data. And now that basically fits on an Excel spreadsheet. But as I trained in medicine, I tried to straddle those two spaces somewhat awkwardly at times. And even departed for about a decade without practicing and just working in tech in Silicon Valley. But it became clear to me after about a decade there that I wanted to go back to some more fundamental pieces of work. I felt like with all of this data and the difficulty from being on the outside to glean insights, that I wanted to come back on the inside, where I could be a trusted researcher working with this vitally important data. And I felt like there's just so much information and knowledge left on the table, unlocked within this data that we've got. And it just made a perfect sort of combination to take those skills I'd learned as a coder and in machine learning and apply it in clinical medicine.
Well, so when you founded the whole institute there for AI, what's the mission of your organization? Why all did you create it anyway?
Yeah, I'd say it's twofold. One is that we really wanted to take what we were doing and make sure that it wasn't just about creating publications, which is lovely and important, but to actually create a pathway for making tools that go into the hands of orthopedic surgeons. So that would be on the one side, is clinically oriented. But we're also equally, if not maybe even more devoted to scientific tools. And we refer to this as algorithmically aided scientific discovery. That machine learning, AI, whatever you want to label it as, has the potential to really turbocharge science. And there's really been a groundswell of interest in this. And I would say that as an application of AI, it's really one of the more fertile areas. And I think orthopedics, all of medicine could stand to benefit from this kind of tooling.
So that was, you gave us a general overview, but what specifically are y'all doing at Dartmouth in terms of the use of AI and what you're doing currently?
Yeah. Our focus is something called federated computation. And another term that really goes hand in hand with it is federated learning. And the issue this is really addressing, let me just state what the problem is first, is we have a major problem in medicine overall, but particularly orthopedics with respect to multi-center trials. That within all of medicine, we lag behind. We're really close to the bottom in terms of fields that conduct multi-center trials. About 9.9 or 10% of our studies are deemed multi-center trials. And that's simply not good enough. We know that to get the insights we need, that we need much larger data sets. They have to be across centers, so we're not just oblivious to the biases within a single center. It's very hard to take data from one hospital get together with another hospital and say, let's just pool it together. And then get another 10 hospitals. Let's just put it all together, and this central server will analyze it, will solve all the problems. It's expensive, it's cumbersome. Then you run into regulatory problems, data use agreements. So what federated learning or federated computation does is conceptually it says, forget about mixing the data. We're not going to mix it at all. You keep it at your house, never has to leave your either cloud instance at the hospital or the server on-prem. And instead, the code is distributed to the hospitals to learn, and then the learnings are brought together in what's called the federated server. So it's bringing code to data rather than bringing the data together and subjecting it to code. If you're not having to mix data, you don't need data use agreements. You don't have to worry as much as a hospital say, look, I lost control of my data. Once it's left, you have a copy problem. That data could go anywhere. There's a liability. Industry also sees it that way, is that that data is a bit radioactive. And if you can do something where you minimize that risk of a data breach, then that's extremely appealing to industry. So we're working with industry on a solution, and it's related to robotics and arthroplasty. Happy to say more, but I'll pause there for a moment.
Wow, that's certainly the deep end of the pool. Yeah, but you've piqued my interest on that. What can you tell us about your work currently in robotics and arthroplasty?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people see it this way now, but I've been gabbing about this for quite a few years. This was the other driver that brought me back to orthopedics is robotics. All of a sudden, you have, number one, a tool that collects data in the operating room, that very, very sacred space where there's so many unknowns, and we know that so many things that happen there have a profound effect on patients. So robotics right now, as far as I'm concerned, are mainly data collection tools, and they're great at execution, but that is a game changer. Moreover, these robots, the data that comes out of them is highly structured. And if you've got the same data structure across multiple hospitals or organizations, this becomes a much easier issue. Everyone is talking about, well, how is it that we put parts in for total knee arthroplasty? Right. It is, and it's a hot topic, and there's some great things happening. You can't go to a conference without hearing about CPAC. Everyone's on it, kinematic alignment. To really crack that nut, what you need is massive multi-center trials. You need data that's highly structured coming out of robots. Actually, what was done in the operating room? What alignment principles did you use? Ultimately, the challenging part is linking that to outcomes, which are wildly noisy. But the only way to overcome some of that noise is that you address it with more volume of data. To me, that's a ripe opportunity to crack that nut, federated learning. And if you're doing it just in a single center, reach out. We are developing a federation presently and have some funding behind it. And so we're really very excited about it.
Oh, man, this is really something else. Let's go back to March at the AAOS 2025 annual meeting in San Diego. We hosted a town hall titled The Use of Artificial Intelligence in Orthopedic Surgery, and you were one of the panelists. It was a standing room only crowd, and clearly a lot of folks were eager to learn more. During that event, you said that AI is medicine's next telephone. Why that particular comparison?
Absolutely. If I look at medicine and I think about what are the biggest advancements in the modern era, I mean, you think about things like antibiotics, sure, that makes great sense. But to me, it's also the telephone. The telephone is embedded within medicine. It's a structural change in medicine. It's what enabled someone with an emergency to actually reach out and get help and expertise and knowledge in a expedient fashion. It's so fundamental now. That is the way that I see AI going as well, that it is going to be intertwined in everything that we do over time, that is going to change the structure of medicine. It is already and will continue to change the doctor-patient relationship, that we now have another entity that is a source of knowledge, maybe even expertise, and that it's simply foundational.
Now, you also offered a beginner's guide to AI then. What are the most important things for AI novices like myself to know?
I would say more than anything that it's math. It's not magic. No magic ponies involved. These are mathematical calculations that are absolutely brute force. And that's why we hear all the talk about these chips data centers being built up, I mean, massive investment, is because it is brute force calculations. Whether you call that intelligence or not, that's up to debate. And, philosophers will probably be waxing intellectual about this for many years to come. In medicine, we're well aware that if we're doing studies where the data is garbage, the old adage of data, garbage in, garbage out, and it holds for AI as well. And I think that is increasingly well known. But I think the other piece of it that is critical to me is what AI does to the doctor-patient relationship and what we have to be aware of. And I'm happy to expound on that because I think it's a very important topic.
Please do.
I think of AI in the context of someone called Marshall McLuhan, and he was kind of a giant in the field of sociology. And he coined the term, the media is the message. So what that's saying is whether that's a radio, a TV, social media, providing this information, there is as much impact in the actual information delivery system as there is the data, knowledge, and information it's conveying. So for me, we get worried about misinformation. And I would say that misinformation has been around forever, whether that's word of mouth outside the exam room with your doctor, whether that's the internet, whether that's social media. And things like large language models are just the latest iteration of this. And so we have to think about what this supposedly all-knowing entity means for how we interact with patients. Many people want to think that the doctor should remain at the center of this relationship, but I think that that's not exactly how it's going to play out. The relationship among patients, doctors, and the AI, it's a triangle. We have the traditional relationship between doctor and patient, but both doctor and patient also has a relationship with AI. What we have to be aware of is if there's one word to walk away with, I would say that it's critical that we maintain trust. Any breach of trust stands to corrupt our position as authority figures, as people who are there to help our patients. That we're also in an era where trust is corroding. And we have to be very mindful of this. I don't think pushing back against AI and convincing people that we should be trusted will work. I think that we have to earn it. And by earning it, I mean using the kind of empathy that we need as physicians that I don't think at this point a machine can provide. And also leaning into the technology, being transparent, being that purveyor of context that people need when they get this information. We will not outcompete AI. We just have to make sure that we work with it and work with it in a way that maintains the trust of our patients.
Right. Do you think that patients are now at the point to where they trust this and they're ready to embrace it? I think I read something not long ago that patients weren't quite there yet. Do you think they're getting to that point with the prevalence of ChatGPT and the other platforms out there?
I think it's tough to say. Encourage people to maintain that skepticism. I think that's critical. I encourage patients to use it and to use it as a tool to come to me with questions. When I see patients now, I routinely, protecting PHI, of course, use an LLM to understand in unique situations what sorts of questions might this person have generated on their own so that I can address those and so that I can, I guess, breach any areas of concern that the AI might be more knowledgeable or that the AI is indicating that I'm somehow withholding information. I don't know the degree to which in my patient population that's true, but it's the only way that I can continue to learn about the technology and advance my own practice.
Speaking of which, the AAOS Board of Directors is investing in understanding AI's application and utility for Academy members in a way that it makes clear not only is AI here to stay, but the Academy is committed to helping members integrate AI into their practices. Now, of course, some members are early adopters. What are the current applications of AI in orthopedics, and what sort of impact have they made on patient care so far?
Yeah, I'm absolutely blown away by the advancements in digital scribes. So my final job in Silicon Valley was the head of machine learning and product at a digital scribe company. And there, along with the other lab member I have, who's the machine learning scientist, we built a very early intent extractor. So it's essentially a Siri for an electronic health record. That was hard. The technology we used, and this was, 2019 or so. I mean, it's so outdated. And the accuracy of the summarized patient records in addition to note creation, to me, is absolutely staggering. I rely on it, particularly for patient histories. I feel like it captures more information. I feel like I can focus more on the patient. And then the ability now, which is relatively new as well, to summarize portions of the patient chart. I can't rave enough about it. It makes my life so much better, and I feel so much more informed, and I go home with my notes done and feeling more prepared in the beginning of clinic.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, we're starting to integrate that at my place, to your point. How about large language models for registry curation? Where do you see that working?
I think it's an excellent idea. I think that is, in many ways, using machine learning or AI to make sense of complex patterns in data, for one. That's after the data is
Right.
collected. And that's what it excels at. So that's not exactly what you're talking about, but that is exactly where the technology excels. To at least have hypothesis generation. To me, that is one of the most powerful parts of it too, so that you know what experiments to run, so you know how to look at something more rigorously, so you know maybe what rocks to look under that you never really thought about before. The other part of AI that our lab's been very, very, very keen on in terms of data curation is measurement. Measurement is foundational to science. You have crummy measures, you're not going to go anywhere. We have a problem where we might have systems where we measure, say, the mechanical access of a limb, here's the hip knee angle, yada, 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 on down the line. But we all have subtly different ways of doing it. And that creates noise. So if you automate that measurement process, and not only automate it, but take that model that you've created and share it with the world, so that anyone doing research on that topic, and maybe they're part of one of these federations, has exactly the same ruler as you. All of a sudden, you have, number one, eliminated the need for humans to sit there and annotate that thing over and over again. Number two, you've created a much more consistent measure. And it is really what unlocks, I think, probably providing registries with much more accurate data and with a lot less cost and human effort.
Another interesting way I was thinking of it is like we currently use the FAAOS index for guesstimating fracture risk of folks with osteoporosis and such. Do you think how much advantage is there for AI above and beyond that to collate even more data to make these predictions? Do you think it's there, or have we already got to figure it out? Is that really just a hammer in search of a nail?
No, I think it is figured out in one way and very problematic in another way. But I actually think that AI can solve this area where the nut's not cracked. In terms of, say, using a plain X-ray and training it to make an estimate of, say, a DEXA score, totally doable. People are doing it. That's not hard.
Right.
What is hard is orchestrating that care, right? Making sure that information surfaces to the right people, that there's even a pathway to manage that patient going forward, doesn't slip between the cracks. That part is hard, I think. Now, you're probably much more of an expertise with respect to osteoporosis and FAAOS measurement, but to me, that's an area that when people start talking about agentic AI, that there could be some opportunities there in terms of, in the background, a very narrowly defined AI being able to orchestrate some of these things to ensure that things are less likely to slip between the cracks. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but
yeah. No, you
let me
hit it
know
right
your
on.
thoughts.
That was right on. So you said that y'all worked on this stuff in 2019, which seems like yesterday. I think there was something going on in the world back then. I can't quite remember. Yeah. But so y'all were just working on this, and you were saying that the processes that you were working with then are already antiquated. This is just moving along at an absolutely breathtaking pace. So, with that in mind, what's most exciting to you, knowing that it's probably going to change tomorrow? What's the most exciting thing that you've got going on with orthopedic surgery and AI currently?
Yeah, for us, it is this federated computation and federated learning. And it is, by definition, a collaborative effort. That the whole idea is to unlock the ability to work together and do multi-center trials. That there are so many things that we'll never derive the answer to without that. So, in terms of our lab, that is our major thrust. That's our North Star right now. And we have funding that's just about to come through for it from industry. The things that I get excited about, though, when I just look more globally at the space, the things that I talked about in that town hall. AlphaFold, I'd mentioned in the presentation, and what that is an effort that won a Nobel Prize for being able to predict protein folding from amino acid sequences. I mean, that is an age-old problem, and the speed at which basically now every known protein in humans the structure's already been derived, or an estimate of it, right? They've not all been, say, scientifically or experimentally proven to be exactly as they've been predicted. But they're moving on now, as I understand, to AlphaFold 3. So they're going beyond just predicting the structure. Of course, structure is intimately related with the function of a protein, but beginning to better predict the function of a protein, where there are binding sites, and being more inclusive to not just amino acid sequences, but DNA, RNA, ligands, antibodies. To me, it's easy as surgeons to forget that the way that we treat osteoarthritis is totally palliative. We give medicines to try to decrease the inflammation. We wait till end organ failure and slam some metal and plastic in, and works pretty well, right? It's
Yeah.
great. But what the real silver bullet is to be able to identify osteoarthritis early, have a drug target to halt its progression, maybe even reverse its progression. And these sorts of tools may very well play a role in that. When is it? Don't know. It's a complex problem. But the real optimists speak a big game about how fast we're going to crack all these nuts. I'm not quite that optimistic, but I'm somewhere in the middle ground. I think it's going to make a big difference.
So you've touched on a number of things that orthopedic surgeons are currently using or imminently going to use in terms of that. But for those of us who are pretty novice to this, can you describe? You've already talked a little bit about the scribes, the virtual scribe and such, and maybe some other predictive models. How does the future look in terms of how an orthopedic surgeon engages with artificial intelligence throughout his or her day? What does that look like?
Yeah. We mentioned the digital scribes, and I know there's been a
Right.
big push in that area. I really do think it is rolling up your sleeves and actually just messing around with some of these LLMs in particular. That is the way you get to know what's going on. I know the first times that I did some years ago now, I was absolutely blown away by what it could accomplish. But it is there's a fidget factor with this, and not being fearful of it. And I think it's important, as we were saying before, so that we go into our interactions with patients knowing what they may have already read about or looked up. And I think increasingly there's a lot of talk now about agentic AI. Medicine, of course, we need to be more conservative. Agentic AI is the idea that you have an AI that doesn't just give you an answer if you type in a prompt, say even a search engine will give that to you now, but actually does something in the background. It's not allowed to be fully autonomous, but I think the reasonable example would be you've got a list of 30 patients you're going to see. Can you please give me a 3 to 5 line summary of each patient, why they might be here, something about the history that's related to that. And then I can review those. My clinic is all prepared when I walk in the morning and I look at it. This seamless sort of preparation done by, a resident or maybe a medical student doing their best to identify what the day is going to look like. Perhaps in the future with robotics, this is another area we're working on, which is a few steps beyond federated computation, but you start hearing about things like digital twins. Digital twins are the concept that you could model process or biology digitally, and that what we're working on is very rudimentary digital twins of a patient's knee, so that when you go into an operating room, you might have some idea historically what their cartilage thicknesses were, what their alignment was, not when they showed up in your clinic, but what it was 10 years ago, pre-arthritis. And then be able to maybe one day make judgments about what cuts should I make to optimize the PROs at the end. So these sorts of things are done with, say, assembly lines in the auto industry. What happens if I modify this little factor? What's the expected outcome? Conceptually, that is also possible in things like orthopedics and medicine as well. If I cut the tibia in 3 degrees of varus and do more of a kinematic approach based on lots of data for this particular patient, what could I expect their outcome to potentially be? That's further down the road, but it's certainly what people are talking about at the bleeding edge.
Seems like y'all could also pull in some of the strange diagnostic rule-outs that you may not be thinking of and say, AI, this is an unusual presentation of this. What am I missing? And then they say, oh, this is a common presentation of malaria, which of course none of us see. And then we would go, oh, and then ask the patient if they had this trial. I'm just reading into this.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Absolutely. You touch on something really, really important here. This is another big take-home point, if I may. From a regulatory standpoint, it's pretty fast and loose. And the thing that I see as one of the hardest things to do, we want metrics on how these things perform. That's hard because the information is so vast. How do you ask it enough questions to know how it performs? Moreover, the way that we evaluate these, you might have a measure like accuracy or area under the curve. And the thing is, you can hide the performance of the model very easily in those numbers. If you give a model, it's called the test set. It's information you say, look, we've got this model. Let's see how smart it is. It's like taking a midterm exam or a final exam. Let's give it the exam. Well, if you give the exam and it's got a lot of easy questions, it's pretty easy to get 99 or 100%. Right? But what if you give it a harder exam? What is a harder exam? Right? What are the cases that humans would have trouble deciding about? Where you and I look at it, we're like, I think this, you think that. Gosh, don't know. In machine learning, those are called edge cases. So I think it's going to take a lot of careful thought to say what is a good test set so that we can all agree on the performance of the model. Are we giving it an easy test, a hard test? Are we giving it enough of the edge cases, which are really the things that you and I probably care about most? I mean, if I see a displaced femur fracture that's just obviously displaced and angular, I'm like, I don't need AI to help me with that. Pretty obvious.
Right.
But perhaps as an arthroplasty surgeon, not being on call for whatever reason, I'm covering hand. I sure hope not. The distance between the scaphoid and the lunate. I'm like, I don't know. That's a tough one to call. Or that it even notifies me that I should look more carefully at it. That's an edge case for me, maybe not a hand surgeon. So defining what are the hard cases, very important. What is a good test set, extremely important. And I don't have good answers for it.
Well, you stepped into another vast area that we should probably talk about, and that is the ethical concerns of this stuff. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. We could probably devote a whole hour or more just to talking about the ethics surrounding artificial intelligence and how we not only just use it in society, but more specifically within medicine and orthopedic surgery. So what ethical concerns do you think we should keep in mind?
Yeah, the things that people bring up frequently, bias, misinformation. And honestly, and this will sound, and I don't mean to be cavalier in saying this, I am less concerned about those. I think we have a handle to some degree on bias. We know it exists. We know to look for it. And provided we do that, we're sensitive to it and critical of the data that it's trained on. Is it representative of a broad, diverse population? Those are things that we can work with. Misinformation, that's been around forever. And so it's about that trust issue. So that I'm only worried about insofar as AI corrodes trust and the larger trends we see in society of not trusting institutions. We have to trust the institutions that regulate these. Right? Society has to trust those for this all to work. We as physicians have to trust them because they're tools that we're using. Then the patients have to trust us. That's the chain of trust. The thing that I'm more worried about is the things that we don't see. And my lab, and I'm not saying this to toot the horn of my lab, we pursued it because we did see it as a problem. There's something, for example, called algorithmic shortcutting. We were very interested in taking x-rays and saying, look, this AI's pretty smart. How much information are we overlooking? If we just give it an x-ray of an arthritic knee, how much more information is lurking there? If we don't tell it it's a Kellgren-Lawrence 1, a 2, a 3, or 4, we just say, hey, look, how much pain does this person have? It's published in JBJS. We found there's hidden information. Wow, how amazing is that? It's something we don't appreciate about the x-ray that's causing symptoms. Wrong. That's true, but it's not doing what we think it's doing. And so we had a follow-up publication in Nature that basically said it's cheating. Or as far as humans are concerned, the algorithm is cheating. It's not cheating, actually. But what it's doing is taking just a vast amount of information that's basically smeared across the pixels of the x-ray. It's not looking just at the joint line. It's looking at little clues that might have to do with subtle differences in the pixels across one machine done at one site versus an x-ray that was done in a completely different city at a completely different hospital. And it's not identifiable things. It's not that it's looking at the medical record number, the obvious metadata emblazoned on it. It is stuff that you cannot extract from the image. So the reason and the way that we showed this was using the x-rays to predict whether or not you like drinking beer or you liked consuming beans. Ridiculous, right? But we could predict it better than chance alone. And it's doing this thing called shortcutting. Now, sometimes that's not a problem. You give it an x-ray, you're like, look, I just want a raw prediction. I mean, whatever information you got at hand, no problem. Kitchen sink, throw it in there. It's fine. But if we think that we can use that for statistical inference and say, oh, it's causal, we know, absolutely not. And there's not a good way to account for that problem. We even started seeing very strange things. So this sounds science fiction-y, but this does tell you that there are these unknown problems. We could take x-rays and predict what year they were done. And it would know beyond just chance whether it was January of one year or December the calendar year before. How? How would it know that? We even started thinking maybe it's background radiation from the sun, and we started looking at sunspots. And then we realized we're not really doing orthopedics anymore, but we started going down a rabbit hole of not really knowing, and it is all part of this black box nature of the algorithms, but it's even a little more pernicious, I think, than some suggest. Long-winded explanation is there's a lot of mysteries out there.
Now, as you know, that a lot of our major journals are not forbidding the use of AI. They just want to know, did you use AI in the formulation of this study, this paper that you've written? And as a reviewer, a lot of times they'll ask me as a reviewer, did you use AI to help you with your review? So if we take that same thing and we flip it down on the patients, do you think that we have an ethical obligation to tell the patients that we're using AI to, number one, for us to do our jobs better, or number two, to treat them like, you know, if once they're asleep in surgery, I'm going to institute AI to make these predictions on your tibial and femoral cuts or whatever. What are your thoughts?
I think we do have an obligation. I don't know if it's an obligation. I just think it's a smart thing to do. And it comes down to trust. And we have to be transparent about what we're doing. And if we don't, that has a real risk of corrupting trust. I think words carry a lot of weight too. And I tend to not like the word AI anymore, just because I've almost found it to be a little bit of a marketing tool. Because there's so many, where do you draw the line? What is it? It's things that traditionally required human intelligence. Like, yeah, but what is that, right? I don't know. I mean, those automated reads on EKGs, those have been around forever, or not forever, but they've been around a long time. And to me, that's still magical. I mean, boy, it does better reads than me by far, right? I like the approach that our journals are using, which is, look, just be transparent. I don't think anyone would say that we have to handwrite our manuscripts because it's unfair to use Microsoft Word or something. It can accelerate science. It can actually improve clarity. Maybe someone who's just wildly intelligent but doesn't have particularly good grammar, and maybe writing's not their thing, if it enables them to write a more cogent piece to share their findings, absolutely. But to answer your question, I think it is about transparency, and I think it's just wise to do it.
To let patients know that you're
Yeah.
using,
Yeah.
So how about our federal regulators? Are they coming down with anything specifically about the use of AI in medicine, that they're slowing things up or affecting the progression of this?
The main thing with respect to where the regulatory landscape is right now is that the FDA basically treats AI as software as a medical device, and that's under the 510(k) or de novo pathway. To me, that fit isn't exactly right. It's not a device, it's a malleable tool. And that Europe, this AI Act, which is much more encompassing beyond just medicine, is really much more stringent. In the US, the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, has a AI risk management framework, but the reality is, looking at it, when I last looked at it in the fall, it's kind of a patchwork. It's pretty fragmented and lagging behind what the Europeans have. So, stay tuned.
Yeah. Now, when I was counsel and advocacy chair, I used to had to listen to a number of podcasts all the time to keep up with what was going on inside the Beltway in D.C. And I cannot remember off the top of my head the congressman's name, but he was markedly younger and far more tech savvy than the vast members of Congress and the Senate. And his whole point in this podcast was that AI was coming after white collar jobs specifically. And one of the examples that he used was in radiology, talking about how modern x-rays and CT scans, MRs, are all a series of ones and zeros. And AI can quickly assess these ones and zeros and see things that we as humans cannot see yet, or can quickly understand things that we are not going to get our hands around till quite a bit later, where AI just grabs it right away. And his point is that there are certain professions, specifically things like radiology and pathology, where you should double think going into that career right now, because you could in fact be replaced by an AI machine. And that left quite an impact on me, especially as your counsel and advocacy chair, and you're trying to figure out what to do to protect the practice of orthopedic surgery and the best practice of orthopedic surgery for patients. What are your thoughts on how, are there specialties within medicine? Are there things within orthopedic surgery that AI may do better than we do, and we won't be doing those things anymore?
Yeah, I think anyone who's absolutely certain in their assessment of that is, I think, probably being a little overly definitive. Do I think we should be running around saying the sky is falling right now? No, I don't. And I think for the most part, these technologies will augment our intelligence, augment the job we do, be assistive. But I do think there will be winners and losers. I think we'd be foolish to think that it's all going to be rainbows and unicorns in the long term. The radiology example is a really good one, and I often start talks with that exactly. The person who made a very bold statement and is just a wildly intelligent person, his name's Jeffrey Hinton. He's basically the godfather of deep learning. Deep learning was originally conceived of many decades ago, and reasons that it wasn't quite right, but he's a true believer, and he's the one who persisted and finally made it clear that no, the time is right, and this is an incredible approach to achieving something like AI. But he said that this was much more than 10 years ago, that it was just so clear to him that radiologists would be out of a job in 10 years.
Wow.
We know that's not the case. And I've not seen much by way of my radiology reads from the radiologists or any sort of annotations on the x-ray that suggest that's happening right now. But I think, look, it was President Obama who had said during a debate at some point, I think he's being questioned about whether there are enough submarines or tanks or this. And he says, basically, we don't need them. We don't do tallies of how many bayonets we have left in the army because they're not needed. And so I think the more pessimistic folks One way of saying that we'll still have a job, but is still sort of dark, is saying that we're basically just going to become auditors. The information will be served up to us, and then we audit the information to make sure that it's not only right, but I think appropriate. Appropriateness is an important thing to evaluate in terms of output from these AI models. Too soon to tell. But I lie more on the optimistic side that this largely will be assistive, and we'll still have to provide context, we'll still have to provide empathy, and that judgment, it being human, matters.
Very well said. Thank you for that. That was the best I've heard, the answer to that, so thank you. So what steps can and should orthopedic practices take now to prepare for future AI-driven changes?
Very good question. And whenever I'm asked things like that, I always realize that there's this tremendous amount of news about AI, but what does it actually mean on the ground, and what should someone do? And you're all of a sudden you just pause. You're like, huh, I don't know. Maybe it's just watching carefully right now. Maybe it's just being plugged in. I don't think anyone has to go into a panic mode and say they need to buy this, that, or the other thing. I think it's just remaining very informed. Yeah, I hate to keep bringing up digital scribes, but I do think that is ripe, and I do think that really improves a doctor's experience of providing care and could help to reduce burnout. But otherwise, I think my prescription is just watch closely, save your money right now. Um, I think research, it's very fertile ground. There,
Right.
you want to go deep into it.
Very well said. So any final thoughts you'd like to share?
My sense is that this whole process, that it will take longer than we think for these changes to really take hold, but when they start to happen, they will happen faster than we can possibly imagine. That there will be a critical point, a tipping point. I don't know when that is, but it's an exciting time. A stat that I heard that I think helped me to put things into context, I think it was an article from Reuters. It was comparing the degree of investment in AI over the last 10 years to other major technologic advancements. And I think one of the only ones ahead of it is railroad from the 1840s, 50s, and 60s. And that was something like 3 trillion in today's dollars, but maybe we're somewhere like half of that on AI within 10 years. It's an exciting time to live in. I mean, to think that one day, hopefully, make it to age 97 and can talk to kids about what was going on at this time. And hopefully we just make good, sound decisions, stay human, be empathetic, and lean into the movement without being Pollyannish and overly trusting.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. This has been a pleasure talking with Dr. Peter Schilling. Peter, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you, Doug.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the AAOS Now podcast, part of the AAOS Bone Beat Orthopedic podcast channel. Production and editing provided by MK Quinn Media. Don't miss out on future episodes of the AAOS Now podcast. Bookmark our page, aaos.org/AAOS-now-podcast. Listen to new and past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Health Podcast Network, and watch video versions of every episode on the AAOS Now podcast YouTube channel.